Alright, my friends, let's go ahead and show off this build's damage against Designated Punching Bag, the Oathbreaker Knight. I have gone ahead and started combat already, just so that this flows a little more smoothly, so you can see the Oathbreaker Knight has taken 20 damage, but that won't matter, I assure you. For day-long buffs, we've just got an Elixir of Hill Giant Strength. That's the small one, not the Cloud Giant Strength, just the 20 Strength Elixir running, as well as Astarion's day-long Happy buff. And we have almost no items equipped. I have equipped the Risky Ring, just to increase our chance of actually hitting with our attacks. And then we have some armor and boots, and those don't increase our damage at all. They're really just there to stop YouTube from flagging this video as inappropriate by showing Astarion's skin on camera. But we are using the slightly bugged weapons, the Deva Maces. These are obtainable through some manipulation of the game to get them to drop from summons. They're not a lot more damage than the next best weapon set, but I just wanted to show off for fun the highest possible damage, so that's the weapon set that we're using for this one. Alright, let's get whacking. We're going to start off by activating Bardic Inspiration so that we can use a Defensive Flourish. This is just the highest damage on a single target against the Oathbreaker Knight here. We got a hit, but didn't critically hit, so we're going to use a level 3 Smite. Then we're going to do the same thing once again with a Defensive Flourish. Another hit that wasn't a critical, so another level 3 Smite. And then we're going to go ahead and use an offhand attack. That was a critical hit, so we're going to use our level 4 Smite on our critical hit. And then we're going to go ahead and use yet another offhand attack. And the Oathbreaker Knight is almost dead, but let's go ahead and Smite for good measure. And that's the Oathbreaker Knight dead in a single round of combat. It's actually fairly unlikely that we only got one critical hit out of those 4 attacks that we made with advantage, but that will show you the incredible damage output of this build, so let's get to building. Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we've got one for the power gamers, because today we're covering a character that might be the single character with the most damage that you can do in a single turn in Baldur's Gate 3, barring some builds that use glitches or exploits or similar things. But in terms of intended mechanics, this is right up there with the most possible damage that you can do in a single turn. This comes at the cost of a lot of resources when you want to do your massive burst damage, but this character also just gets excellent sustained damage every turn of combat, and also provides a ton of utility to your party in the form of being a party face, having excellent lockpicking skills, and so you provide both in combat and out of combat skills. You also get incredible defenses and mobility, which means that this character is really the whole package. You can add it to any party that needs additional damage, which of course is any party, and it will be able to bring even the toughest bosses from full to zero in a single round of combat, with only a few enemies in the game capable of resisting your Nova damage output. So this character is going to be able to wipe the floor with most enemy encounters. For that reason, I think that if you are relatively new to the game, I actually wouldn't recommend playing this character because it is going to kill enemies too fast for it to be fun. But for those of you who are really looking to push the boundaries of what the game can do, this is the character for you. Before I begin, I do want to take a moment to say thank you so much to Eridom for the $2 donation, Katrina Ryan for the $20, Faithful for the $5, and Pierre Pst for the $5 for becoming a channel member and for donating 5 channel memberships during my most recent live stream. Thank you so much, my friends. It really does mean a lot. The support is incredible, and congratulations to those of you who were donated a channel membership. Welcome. Alright, let's get to the build. I'm using Astarion as the example character here because this build will synergize incredibly with some of Astarion's late-game story events, and hit chance is something that this build actually needs more of, which Astarion can provide. For that reason, he's the sort of most optimal pick because of his unique origin character abilities, but this is also on flavor for him. We're going to be using rogue levels, we will also be using paladin levels, so it would be on flavor for Minthara as well, and if you want to build this character as a custom character, character, then the two standout races to pick are going to be Wood Elf, because the bonus movement speed synergizes extremely well with this character, as it does indeed with every character, but especially with this character, because we will be able to move up to 3 times a turn, so that multiplies the movement speed significantly, and all you have to do is get next to enemies and start hitting them for them to die, so faster is better. Or Dwergar, because it is the power gamer's pick, and this is a power gaming build, though, like I said, the most mechanically optimal choice is probably to pick this for Astarion, so if you just want to squeeze out every last drop of power from the build, then he's your man. Although this build will use both Rogue and Paladin levels to maximize our damage, that's actually not where we're going to start. We're going to start with Bard. Not only does this give us the excellent utility that Bards are capable of, and gets us closer to the very powerful class features of the Swords Bard, it also allows us to start with any skills. One of the great things about this character is that we will be able to fill any niches that you need in your party. This can be a party face, this can be a lockpicking character. We're going to get a lot of skills and expertise in a lot of skills. So if you need a dialogue character, this can be your dialogue character. If you need additional skill access in any other arena, this character can handle it. So starting with Bard lets us do that. For our ability scores, this character, because of its very high attribute requirements, is going to need to use either an Elixir of Hill Giant Strength every day, or the Gloves of Dexterity. You can also, of course, use both, but this character only needs one of them. I think that in general, the Elixir of Hill Giant Strength is the better route to go, and you can just drink one of those every day to set your strength to 20, because not only is that slightly stronger in terms of the weapons that we're going to be able to access and so on, it also gives you a little bit more utility because the Gloves of Dexterity are so in demand across most parties, so you won't compete with other characters that might need them with this character if you go the Elixir route. Either way, though, we're going to take the same attribute spread, and that attribute spread is going to be 16 Dexterity, which, of course, if you're taking the gloves, you will simply drop down to 8 when you equip the gloves. 16 Constitution for hit points, and to maintain concentration on any spells we might want to maintain concentration on. 12 Wisdom, and 14 Charisma. Now, you can swap these around and take 14 Wisdom and lower Charisma if you aren't going to use this character for dialogue skills, but since you have the ability to do so, I figure we might as well, so let's pick up the Charisma so that we can have high dialogues. For our skill selection, then, you can pick whatever you need, whatever you need for your party, but of course this character does very well if you have access to all of the dialogue skills, so we might as well pick those up. You can also gain access to stealth and sleight of hand, and so that this character can fill those roles in your party as well. For our cantrip selection, we are going to take Friends, which lets us be better at our role as a party face, and we are going to take Minor Illusion because grouping enemies up is going to be very valuable for this character, thanks to the Swords Bard flourishes allowing us to hit grouped enemies. Minor Illusion to pull 2 enemies together and then hit them both with a Swords Bard flourish allows us to make even more smite attacks in a turn and also just output even more damage, so it's a key component of this character's kit. For our spell selection, we are not going to take anything that requires a save DC, because this character is not going to have high enough charisma to reliably land spells that require saves. In the early game, we're going to fight with a bow with our 16 dexterity, and then of course, as soon as we get access to better melee capability, we're going to switch to dual-wielding weapons, but which will be our damage output, but at no point are we ever going to use spells as our primary offensive method. All of our spell slots are earmarked for smites anyways, so we're just going to take utility spells. Ritual spells like Longstrider and Featherfall and Disguise Self are excellent, or Speak with Animals. All of those don't cost a spell slot and will allow you to also fill the role in your as the party face better, so I might recommend something like this, and then taking Healing Word just because it's excellent to have as an emergency option while you rarely will have the spell slots to spend on it, or while you rarely will want to spend spell slots on it. It is an irreplaceable effect in your party, and the more characters who have access to Healing Word, the better, because it's just great for emergencies. So for our spells, we'll take something like this. Alright, that's level 1. Let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we are going to immediately deviate out of Bard, and we're going to take a level of Paladin. This is great for a couple reasons. One, it gets us medium armor proficiency. We don't need heavy armor proficiency. Our dexterity is high enough, so we can start with Bard for the skill access. And it gets us shield proficiency. So in the very early game, when we're operating as a ranged character, you can have a shield equipped and just have higher AC. That makes this character very safe, even in the early game. Level 2 is where some honor mode runs will end if you take a bad fight or just get unlucky rolls against you, depending on exactly what fights you take at this level, assuming that you fight at all at this level. But it's very possible to just lose the run outright at level 2, and so having the additional armor class to prevent that from happening can be very useful in the early game and can keep your character alive. While you're playing as a ranged character, this makes your party just that much safer, and every little bit of safety in the early game matters a lot, in my opinion. For our subclass, it really doesn't matter. We will not be getting any of the later subclass features from Paladin, and I think that the best one to pick is going to be the Oath of Ancients, so that you can take Healing Radiance, which just gives you a little bit of extra utility for your party, and lets you have the buff on heal items. If that is something that your party doesn't have access to elsewhere, you can equip those for parts of the early game as well, up until your damage comes online. Oath of the Ancients just has the most utility at level 1, but honestly you can pick what Paladin Oath you're going for flavor. It doesn't have a huge mechanical bearing on the outcome of this character. At character level 2, though, we get access to Divine Smite. Now, we have 1 level of Bard and 2 levels of Paladin, so we still only have first level spell slots, but with our Divine Smite, we are going to be able to hit enemies multiple times per turn if we're dual-wielding weapons. At present, we can only have 1 weapon in our main hand and 1 weapon in our offhand, but that which, of course, that will stay true, but we will be making multiple attacks with them as we level up, and that will allow us to do incredible amounts of damage output while staying very safe, even on into the late game, thanks to our relatively high AC that we're getting from our high dexterity and so on. The damage output that we get from main hand and offhand smites is higher than any other character in the game already, and so we are right away starting to do even more burst damage than other characters can get. For our fighting style here, we are going to be using 2 one-handed weapons, so there's only 1 fighting style that does anything for us, and that is defense, but the +1 AC is very good for this character. This character's defensive capabilities are part of what makes it so strong, in addition to its extreme damage, so adding in defense fighting style helps a lot with that as well. For our prepared spells, we're going to go ahead and take just other utility spells. Again, we're going to be using almost all of our spell slots for smites rather than for actually casting spells, so we just take situational utility spells that might come up, like Protection from Good and Evil, like Shield of Faith, like Heroism, which is just a great way to give yourself a little bit of extra healing if you happen to need it in an emergency, but for the most part, these spells are going to be entirely used for smites, so what we have prepared doesn't matter that much. One thing to note, though, is that unlike other Paladin builds, you will almost never want to use Thunderous Smite or the other smites. Usually Thunderous Smite is the one that you would use on other Paladin builds, but because these take a bonus action to use, and this character will have an offhand attack that it can make with a bonus action, it's rarely a good use of a spell slot to Thunderous Smite. Just make an offhand attack and use a normal smite with that offhand attack, rather than trying to stack multiple smites with the bonus action. Your bonus action is more valuable than casting these spells, so you only take utility spells from your spell preparation. At level 4, this character is going to go back yet again and take more Bard levels. Now that we have access to Smite, increasing our spell slots is going to be very important. Smites can go up to 4th level spell slots, and if you smite with a 4th level spell, you get 5d8 damage off of that smite, so we want to get as many of those as possible to be able to make as many high level smites as possible in a single round. At 2nd level Bard, with 2 levels of Paladin, we're now a 3rd level spellcaster, so we unlock our 2nd level spell slots. That means that we can learn 2nd level spells, but more importantly it means we can smite with 2nd level spell slots, and you can do up to 2 of those already even at level 4, which is a pretty significant amount of damage, especially because you can output that all in a single turn with a main hand attack and an offhand attack. For our spell selection here, it really doesn't matter. We only learn level 1 spells, and we've already got all the good ones, so just take anything that you think might occasionally come up, probably a ritual spell or a utility spell, and then go on to Bard level 3, where we get to select our subclass, which is of course the College of Swords. This gives us several amazing things for this character. Firstly, of course, you get the flourishes. The slashing flourishes allow you to attack multiple enemies at once. If you have your smites set as a reaction, then you can make multiple smites per slashing flourish, which is already even more smites in a single round. They also do an additional d6 of damage. And you get the other options for flourishes as well. Defensive flourish and mobile flourish are both very useful and will come up pretty frequently, and give you a tool for when you're out of spell slots for smiting as well. This character, of course, burns through resources very fast, although I should mention that, as with a lot of these builds that are focused on outputting enormous amounts of damage in a single turn, just because you can do something doesn't mean it's your only trick. It doesn't mean you have to. This character will also just get great sustained damage with its attacks, as it just regularly attacks without smites. So just because you can burst enemies from full to zero doesn't mean that's the only thing that you do. In most combats, other characters would spend the same amount of resources that you're going to spend in order to win that combat. They'd just have to do it over multiple turns by casting like 2 level 3 spells in order to win a difficult boss fight. You just use both of those in the first turn in the form of smites, so you get all of your resource expenditure out of the way right at the beginning of combat. In an unintuitive way, this actually ends up saving your party resources because you aren't having to burn spells on defensive options, you aren't having to burn spells on controlling enemies, and you aren't having to burn spells on healing or potions on healing back damage you might have taken. Rather, the enemies are just dead because you spent all your resources up front, so you actually conserve resources and long rest less frequently than many other parties will because of the amazing damage that you're capable of outputting by burning all of your long rest resources. It's a little bit of a counterintuitive way for things to work, but that is how it works in practice. Slashing flourishes, though, or all the flourishes, though, give you additional things to do when you're not smiting, as well as buffing up your Nova damage on smiting turns, but the hits don't stop there. We also get a fighting style, which allows us to take 2 weapon fighting. This means that we can now add our stats to our offhand damage, which is really powerful already, because we are going to be able to now have 2 attacks. This is the point in the game, level 5, where a normal martial character would have extra attack. They'd be able to make multiple attacks in a turn. We don't have that yet, and won't for a couple more levels, but we've now made our offhand attack just as good as our main hand attack, so while we're a little behind in terms of number of attacks compared to some builds, we are making up for that by having... So while we are not getting the number of main hand attacks that some builds get, we're making up for that by making our offhand attack just as good as another main hand attack. We also get to pick up some more skills and some skill expertise. So we can take expertise in, let's say, persuasion and sleight of hand to make this character even better at doing the utility roles that it was intended to fill, and boost our ability to perform utility roles for our party significantly. And of course we get another spell. At level 2 spells, there's really not that much that we want, so we're just going to take utility spell because we don't really need combat spells, since all of our in-combat spells are just going to be spent on smites. But we can take, for example, Enhance Ability to make us even better at out-of-combat utility, or Cloud of Daggers just to have really reliable damage for when we need it. Altogether, this gives us a massive boost to our character, but it continues to only get better from here. At Bard level 4, we get an additional feat. And there are 2 feats that this build really wants. That's part of why we're using the stat item, so that we don't have to ever put any of our feats into an ability improvement. The first feat that we're going to take is Dual Wielder. This lets us use our main hand and offhand weapons regardless of whether they are light. So we are going to get additional damage because of just upgrading the base damage of our main hand weapon, of our weapons. We get to use whatever the best weapons that we find are, but it also gives us access to some particular unique weapons that are especially good for this character. This character makes, for example, an excellent wielder for Falar Aluv, which is a weapon that allows you to have all of your hits deal a little bit of extra damage, because you can use it as an offhand weapon alongside a more powerful main hand weapon to gain the benefits of Shriek and deal an extra d4 damage on all of your attacks. On Tactician difficulty or below, Falar Aluv also works as a damage rider source, which if you don't know what that means, think it's bugged, and does more damage, because every smite will also apply the Falar damage as well as your main hand attack, so you'll just get to double apply it on every attack, which makes it even better for this character. So Dual Wielder really buffs up this character significantly in terms of the damage that we can output and the options that we have available. For our cantrip selection here, we are going to, of course, pick up True Strike, because you have to do so to annoy people in the YouTube comments. And then for our spells, we're going to take any utility spells that we feel like we might need, like Invisibility, or just like Reliable Damage with Cloud of Daggers. Always useful to have some guaranteed damage somewhere in a build so that you can be certain to finish off an enemy. A 100% chance of killing a 1 health enemy is better than a 99% chance, so even if you're very likely to hit your attacks, making things a certainty, of course, is a good way to add additional safety to your runs, as anyone who's played XCOM will know. At this next level, we get to pick up 3rd level spells, and of course we have increased to a 6th level spellcaster, so we have our third level smite. I didn't mention this last level, but we got level 3 spell slots at level 6, allowing us to make level 3 smite attacks, up to 2 in a round. Now we have up to 3 per day, and we get access to 3rd level spells, of which there's a few that are pretty reasonable for us. We can either just take things like Speak with Dead that are useful utility spells for out of combat, or we can take things like Plant Growth that have no saving throw and can really cripple enemies in certain encounters. I'm going to recommend taking Plant Growth. Another option is this build can, of course, use Arcane Acuity, so you can pick up any illusion or enchantment spells like Hypnotic Pattern that you want to use as disables as a bonus action with Arcane Acuity and the Ring of the Mystic Scoundrel. That's not what this build is really for, but it's definitely a powerful option that you should consider if that's a direction you want to go. If it is, you take like Hypnotic Pattern and Hold Person to have even more broken mechanics in a single character. But most importantly, when we hit Bard level 6, we get access to a 4th level spell slot, allowing us to make up to 1 4th level smite and 3 3rd level smites per day, which at this point we also get extra attack, so now we can make up to 1 4th level smite and 2 3rd level smites in a single round, because we get to do 2 of those with a main hand attack and then 1 of them with an offhand attack. So our burst damage is incredible. The amount of damage that this character outputs at this point is absurd. 3 smites in a round is enough to drop pretty much any enemy in a single round of combat, and while this does burn a lot of your resources, the fact that you also have flourishes, spells, and additional lower level smites means that you have relative longevity for a paladin build as well. So not only does this build get higher damage than your standard paladin build, it also comes online earlier by virtue of getting higher level smite slots and having the offhand attack instead of needing to reach level 5 for the extra attack, and it gets to act for longer during the day. But we can make it even better as we continue to level up. We'll just go ahead and pick any spell that we think our party might need at this point, and then level up to character level 9, where we are going to branch out for a 3rd time and begin taking rogue levels. This gives us sneak attack. Now, you need a finesse weapon in your main hand in order to use sneak attack, so there will be some weapon setups thanks to Dual Wielder which will not allow us to do this, but this will increase our damage even more when we are able to trigger sneak attack. Mostly though, what this gives us is an additional spell and 2 more additional skill expertise, so we can have our skills be even higher for whatever skill checks we think we might need. You can place those in some dialogue skills, Or if you picked up some of the skills that you could also respec to pick up some of the skills you might need for late game skill checks. For example, picking up religion from your bard levels and then taking religion expertise can make the mirror much easier if that's something that you're interested in doing, or various other options are useful for the additional skill expertises, or just placing them in your dialogue skills so you always succeed on your dialogue checks. Either way, this character gets to have a lot of extra utility from its rogue levels, but that's not really what we're here for. At rogue level 2, we get cunning actions to bonus action dash, hide, or disengage, which is of course awesome. This gives us a lot more mobility, and with this character's and because this character is relatively vulnerable in terms of its hit points, this gives us a lot more survivability and utility across the battlefield. We get to move around much more rapidly, we can reposition to make sure that we're always hitting the right enemy, and when we do get to hit an enemy, we will burst them down immediately, so it's very useful to be able to reposition this easily. But the real prize, of course, as is usual for Rogue, comes at Rogue level 3, when we get to take our Thief level. The additional offhand attack, the additional bonus action, is either an additional dash, jump, hide, disengage, or just another offhand attack, which can be a 4th smite. This lines up pretty well with the spell slots we have available, so in a combat where we're spending all of our resources, we can spend a 4th level smite and 3 3rd level smites for massive damage output. The amount of damage that outputting 4 smites in a single round of combat can do is of course off the charts, and this character can do it regularly without any buffs from allies. You don't need haste or anything, but you get even more smites if you have haste or a bloodlust potion or a speed potion to boost up your attacks even further. And so having this 4th attack per round is obviously excellent. Combined with dual wielding and our flourishes as well, this character just gets to have excellent consistent damage every turn. 4 attacks per turn with full damage output based on whatever weapons we have is a lot of damage even without smites or any other buffs. So this character's baseline damage is already very high, but then on turns where you really want to go Nova, of course, you can do even more damage. Finally, let's lean even further into damage with our 4th rogue level, where we can get our 2nd feat, and the 2nd feat that we're going to take is Savage Attacker. Being able to re-roll the enormous number of dice that we're rolling is excellent for this character, of course, because this will be on most attacks for us a roughly 30% increase in our average damage, and a 30% increase in our average damage when our average damage is in the 200s or 250s range means that we are going from bringing just about every enemy down near 0 to bringing just about every enemy down to 0 in a single round of combat. Savage Attacker also helps mitigate bad luck, makes us much more reliable in terms of how likely we are to actually kill an enemy with a single smite or with a single roll. And while it doesn't let us re-roll our sneak attack dice because of a bug, it does let us re-roll any other additional dice that we might have from Falar, from items, or additional bonuses from allies. So it works not only with our smite damage and our base weapon damage, but with any other buffs that we might have, which of course this character is going to collect. And since we're rolling so many dice, we're very likely to be wanting to equip critical hit gear, so re-rolling even more dice when we get a critical hit, even more important. That's the build. Let's talk about items. Items for this character really come in 4 different types, I guess. Firstly, of course, we need our stat items. This character requires either the Gloves of Dexterity or an Elixir of Hill Giant Strength in order to have enough stats to actually land its attacks, so you're going to need one of those. If you're using the Gloves of Dexterity, of course, you're limited to finesse weapons for your attacks, because you'll need to be able to make dexterity-based attacks, but that's fine because a lot of the best weapons for this character are finesse weapons anyways. Overall, though, the Elixir's just a little bit better, I think, because it lets us free up our glove slot for something that does extra damage. Because the second thing that we want is anything that does additional damage dice. This character is going to be making so many attacks and rolling a lot of them with advantage, critically hitting very frequently, re-rolling all our dice due to Savage Attacker. So any weapon that adds additional damage dice, or any item that adds additional damage dice per attack, is incredibly useful for this character. Items like the Flawed Helldusk Glove that make all of your attacks deal additional damage, or just weapons with additional elemental damage dice on them, like the Devotee's Mace with the 1d8 Radiant, are extremely helpful for this character because they increase your damage output massively. Next, you're going to want stuff with critical hit chance. This is a Paladin build, and a Rogue build, and a rolls lots of dice build, and so this character loves critical hits. Anything that enables you to critically hit more often is going to be incredibly strong for this character. One thing to keep in mind is that passive bonuses on ranged weapons apply even when you're wielding melee weapons, so you can use a bow like the Deadshot to improve your critical hit chance, and gain the benefit of it even when you're making melee attacks. So anything that improves your critical hit chance is going to be incredibly important. Next, of course, we want bonuses to initiative. This character is going to end with either 16 or 18 dexterity and doesn't get access to alert because we simply can't fit it into the build, and that's just not enough initiative to be comfortable on honor mode. I like all of my builds to be at like +7 initiative minimum, so any item that we can find that increases our initiative is going to be very useful for this character. In fact, one of the best ways to do this is some of the light armors that increase your initiative, like the Elegant Studded Leather or the Cat's Grace armor. These, even though we have medium armor proficiency, will provide plenty of AC. Thanks to dual wielder and defense fighting style, we'll still get reasonable AC out of it, and can be used to boost our initiative at the cost of a slot that we aren't otherwise gaining a lot of benefit from, because this character doesn't care a lot about its armor slot, so boosts to initiative like that are incredibly valuable. Finally, for a specific item that is especially good, and this one does result from a little bit of a glitch, but there is a way to obtain the Theva Maces, which are a bugged weapon that you can get. It's the one that the summoned Theva drops, which is a ridiculously powerful weapon. Now, you're not really supposed to be able to access this in-game, but there are ways to do it. You can look it up on the BG3 wiki, which has a detailed procedure for how to get this weapon. And since we have dual wielder, you can just go ahead and dual wield these. The additional 4d8 radiant damage is the equivalent of another level 3 smite on every attack. So you're going from doing 4 level 3+ smites to doing 8 level 3+ smites in a single round, if you can equip these weapons. So this is going to be the highest damage output option available, of course, though it does involve abusing a small glitch. If you're not happy to do that, though, you don't actually lose that much damage by equipping, say, Falar and the Knife of the Undermountain King. That gives you more critical hit chance and lets you use Falar in order to trigger that damage over and over again. So there are lots of different weapon options that work for this character. Experiment and see which ones do the most damage given the setup that you have with your party and so on. It's also worth noting that we'll be doing a ton of attacks, and we want advantage, so something like the Risky Ring that can give us advantage on our attacks is incredibly useful for this character, and definitely this is one of the better characters to use it. And if you think that enemies might survive, this is a character that can use Radiating Orb builds. We'll be doing a lot of radiant damage, so you can use like the Luminous Gloves and the Callous Glow Ring to do additional Radiating Orbs and really shut down bosses that way, but mostly you should be attempting to just kill them rather than try to shut them down, just an option that is available to you. Alright, my friends, I hope that you have enjoyed this look at the one-turn killer, one of the highest damage characters in Baldur's Gate 3. If you have, of course, feel free to leave a comment and like the video, because this character I think is awesome and can fit in any party that wants more damage, which is all of them. And doing so helps me out a ton with the algorithm. And of course you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 builds and other strategy game content. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.